afternoon. Welcome back to St. Peter's in Hove. I'm Father Alexander, and here we go again. Step 227 on our walking tour through the Bible. Well, we're in the book of Ecclesiastes, that spiritual reader, that vade mecum, that spiritual guide, the book that you take with you and you read for inspiration. It's a long book, it's 50 chapters. I'm not going to go through every single bit, but I'm now at chapter 7, and there are two things that strike me about chapter 7. One, there are certain things in chapter 7 that Jesus himself could have said. Don't forget, this is written 200 BC. Jesus must have read this book. And these are the sort of things that Jesus himself would have said. So, chapter 7, verse 4, do not ask the Lord for the highest place or the king for a seat of honor. Remember our blessed Lord talking about when you go to a banquet, take the lowest place, then you'll be moved up higher. Don't push yourself forward, otherwise you might be demoted. Like, he might well have had this verse in mind when he told us that parable. Do not parade your uprightness before the Lord, or your wisdom before the king. Now, Jesus says, do not parade your good deeds before men, but do not parade your uprightness before the Lord. In other words, don't make a show of your good deeds. Do not scheme to be appointed judge. Judge not, and you shall not be judged. For fear you should not be strong enough to stamp out injustice, for fear of being swayed by someone influential. There it's much more practical. Don't get yourself made a judge, because you might well find that you're overawed by these really important people and you might be susceptible to bribery and corruption. For fear of being and so risk the loss of your integrity. Do not wrong the general body of citizens and so lower yourself in popular esteem. That again is rather Roman sort of advice, Greek advice. In other words, you want to be respected by the community, so be careful you don't lose that respect. Do not be drawn to sin twice over, for you will not go unpunished even once, and so on. Do not be hesitant in prayer. Do not neglect to give alms, and so on. And a lot of this is really just straightforward stuff, but worth hearing again. So, for example, do not laugh at someone who is sad at heart. For he who brings low can also lift up on high. Therefore, but for the grace of God, go you. But let's go over the page and look at this bit where he says again over the page, this is verse 27, 28, with all your heart, honor your father. Never forget the birth pangs of your mother. We've already heard that. Love your mother, love your father. Remember, you owe your birth to them, he says. How can you repay them for what they've done for you? In other words, he's very, very into filial piety, and quite rightly so. Then he says something our blessed Lord never says. And this, I've never heard this read out in church. He says, with all your soul, fear the Lord and revere his priests. With all your might, love him who made you, God, and do not abandon his ministers. That might mean the Levites as well as the priests. Fear the Lord and honor the priest, and give him, the priest, the portion enjoined on you. First fruits, sacrifice of reparation, shoulder gift, sanctification, sacrifice, first fruits of holy things. Those are all the things that are laid down in the Torah, which belong to the priest from the sacrifice. So the priest gets the shoulder of the animal and so on. Okay, this I think is unusual. I haven't come across it before in the Old Testament. This command to revere and love the clergy, the priests, because we're talking about the Jewish priests here. In fact, if you go back to the first book of the Kings, you'll find that the priests come out of it rather badly. Particularly Eli and Eli's sons don't come out of it particularly well. There's no real cult of the clergy in the book of the Kings, in my humble opinion. There is a cult of the king, and often the king, Solomon, acts as a priest. He acts as the one who consecrates the temple. The priests really just get a little bit of a look in. Later on, they get a large role to play when they overthrow the evil queen Athaliah and restore the house of Jacob to its house of David to its proper place by making this boy king. Anyway, but generally speaking, the priest in the Old Testament is just somebody you have there who's necessary, who is the descendant of Aaron, of course, and who's doing an important task, but he's nobody special. I don't think you get the impression at all in the Old Testament. The world of the Old Testament is priest-ridden, as, let's say, undoubtedly the Catholic Church has been at certain times in its history. So this is interesting, isn't it? Revere the priests. Late on in the Old Testament, we're told, revere the priests, look after the priests. This means the priests of the temple in Jerusalem, the Sadducees, that huge bunch of people who are descended from Zadok the priest and who are descended from Aaron, essentially. And of course, one of the ways you show you love the priests is by giving them money and by paying the tithes that you're supposed to pay to the priest. Even nowadays, if you have a reverence for the clergy, you will support them financially, I would have thought. And of course, in the priests do rely on what you, the laity, give them. If you don't give them anything, then they will have nothing. Anyway, and don't forget, what the priest gets is not the collection, except at Christmas and Easter. What he gets is what you give him for baptisms, what you give him for mass stipends, and what you give him, just generally for other things, which is the modern equivalent: first fruits, sacrifice of reparation, shoulder gift, etc. Okay, it's as a priest reading this, I feel that it would be lovely if people surrounded the priests with care, attention, and support. I think it's the most important thing, by which I don't just mean financial support, but to let the priests know that they can rely on the laity for support. I think the laity need to help the priests. When I first started out, a long time ago, at St. Mary's, Stoke Hill, Newport, there were 3 priests in the parish. Now, I've been back there recently, I think there are 2, but they've got 6 or 7 parishes to look after. This parish here, St. Peter's in Hove, had 3 priests. Now it's only got me. So and I've been very lucky recently because we've done a sort of a bit of a call for volunteers. I've now got, for example, 2 ladies working on the baptism certificates, which is great. I've got an official light bulb changer, which is great. I've got a parish historian, which is great. We've got a parish secretary, we've got a sacristan, we've got a flower arranger, and we've got lots of other people. We've also got somebody to do gift aid, thanks be to God. We've got a treasurer, and so on. We've got about a team of about 20 people, all of whom are doing useful things. And we've also got a leadership team, which is a team of about 4 people. And that has to be simply because by being baptized, the laity participate in the munus of priesthood, that they are part of the worshipping church, and therefore it is their church because they've been baptized. They've been anointed as prophets, priests, and kings, so they can get on with these jobs, which are not jobs as such. They are being part of the body of Christ. That's very important. But also practically, it's very important because most priests know nothing about invoices and bills and electrical things and so on and so forth. They know practically nothing. Therefore, they need your help. So if you're listening to this, if you've got any practical skill, please share it with your parish. It's not just helping Father, it's helping the entire parish. Now, but of course, here he's talking about something that goes a bit further, and that is a reverence for the priesthood. Simply because the priest has been chosen by God, he's been anointed by God, he's had the hands of the bishop laid upon him, he is part of the apostolic succession. Don't forget, Aaron was anointed and things like that. The priest dresses in a special way, just like Aaron. The priest of today, the Catholic priest of today, carries on the priesthood of Aaron. The priesthood of Aaron no longer exists because there's no longer a Jewish temple, but the priesthood of the Catholic Church is the inheritor of the traditions of the priesthood of Aaron. We stand between the people and God, interceding for the people of God, offering sacrifice for the people of God. And we're also a bit like the rabbis in that we're supposed to teach the people of God so that the people of God will know the law of God and will profit by it and will know how to pray and take part in the liturgy. So it's, I think there's a tremendous anger against priests nowadays because when Catholics look at the church and they see the woes of the church, which have been self-inflicted, they blame the priests. This is to some extent justified, but what I would say is that um, the priests are supervised by the bishops and by religious superiors if they're a member of a religious order. And the priests didn't get into trouble all on their own. Priests, other priests are meant to look after priests. Priests form a body, they form a community, and that community should support itself. One of the real woes of the church is that priests have been left on their own without support. Priests have got into trouble and nobody's done anything to stop that trouble, to intervene. I speak from personal experience here. When I was much younger, we did complain on many occasions about certain priests, about their behaviour, and the superiors did nothing about it. I'm talking about a specific case. I won't go into the actual details. This is over 30 years ago. And after that, you just give up complaining because you realise that you're talking to a brick wall and nobody is going to listen to you. But this was certainly the case. We have to confront bad behaviour wherever we find it. We have to confront problematic behaviour wherever we find it. If there is an overwhelming fault in the modern clergy, it's cowardice. They don't want to confront difficult things. They just push that aside. We'll leave that. So as a priest, you have got a huge responsibility. But of course, if you're a bishop or a religious superior, provincial, or a general of an order, that responsibility is even greater. So with all your soul fear the Lord and revere his priests. With all your might love him who made you and do not abandon his ministers. So don't neglect your priest. Your priest is a priest for you. He's in the community. The community needs to support him. And we're all in a community of some sort. We do need the help of other people. And sometimes, of course, we do have to step in when things bad are happening and let people know that this cannot continue. When we put things off, the problem just gets worse. We need to nip these problems in the bud. If you see a priest who's drinking too much, you need to confront him. Maybe not you, but somebody needs to confront him. You need to say, hey, you're drinking too much. You need to stop. And you need to, when you get all this nonsense about, oh, I don't drink too much, I just like to drink and blah, 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 or I only drink at weekend or only on my day off. You need to brush that aside and say, don't give us that nonsense. You're drinking too much. Your drinking is a problem, and so on. That's really important. It's part of, we don't do this to be aggressive. We do this to show our care of each other. I've talked quite a long time about that. Makes you think, doesn't it? The book of Ecclesiasticus is a handbook written over 2,000 years ago, but clearly still up to date and still a stimulant to us today. Remember what Holy Scripture is there. It's stimulante, criticante, integrante, stimulating, critical, and integrating. It helps us to get up, to get us thinking. It helps to shake us out of lazy thinking. And it helps us to integrate our thought. And in this, it certainly does. What's our vision of the priesthood? 50 years on from the Second Vatican Council, we're still not quite sure, are we? All the best. Bye.